Calling all beings. Calling all beings.
Yeah! Welcome back to Calling All Beings. This is an exciting night on the show, and we're talking about 3 letters, baby. Nathan, what are those 3 letters?
ABC?
C.
Oh,
I.
yeah, CIA, right,
A.
yes.
That's what we're talking about, baby. So welcome back. I'm your host, DJ, along with my co-conspirator in this joint, my man, Money Nathan.
What's going on, everybody? Great to see everyone. It's been a while. Been a couple weeks for us. Really excited for tonight's show. So thank you to everyone who's joined in to listen. We're going to have a great time.
Got to see this brother in NYC, people. Had some Korean food with him. He was doping it up with some katsudon. Anyway, also want to introduce our researcher and the brilliant mental health professional, Debs. How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing very well, and I'm happy to say that maybe very soon I will see Nathan in New York. I'm thinking about going to that conference.
Nice. That's awesome. Fantastic.
Can I get it? Amen. Yes, and Deb, I was so happy. I got to speak with Deb today and yesterday. I got to speak with Steph today. Life's good. And Nathan, he needed a couple-day break from me, but that's okay. So anyway, if you would bring on our guest panelists real quick. So
Sure.
Kevin couldn't make it tonight, but guess what, people? We got someone with 2 varsity letters. We're talking about my U.S. Navy CIA brother, John Ramirez. Yeah!
John. Great to have you with us. Welcome to the show. I guess you're part of the show now. By the way, I have a benefits package. We can let you know about that later.
Yeah, yes, we'll talk about 401k and the matching on the eyeglasses and dental. But anyway, but right now we want to bring in the guest of the hour, and it was so nice of John to come on and help us ask some questions to Jim. As if you need, because anybody could ask like a zillion questions to this man. This brother right here has a degree in secondary education from the Ohio State University and a literary bachelor's, and he has a master's in English Lit. And guess what? He was an ops officer in the CIA's Directorate of Operation during his 25 years at the agency, and he is currently the co-founder and VP of operations of To the Stars Academy, along with brother Tom DeLong, a seminal organization for U.S. disclosure for the UFO disclosure movement. So let me tell you something, people. Don't play with this man. Don't talk no craziness. He gonna have you hog-tied up in the back of a yacht like Liam Neeson's victim with an apple hanging out your mouth. So don't play no games. But put your hands together for my man, Jim Semivan! Yeah!
The one that I signed up for here.
Welcome, Jim.
Enthusiasm. Enthusiasm.
Yes, sir.
I know. I'm happy with it. I'm good. I'm good to go.
Amen, Jim.
All right.
On, welcome.
Amen. Right.
He has a
All
special
right.
set of skills, I think.
Yeah, he does. Don't play with this man. That's all I got to tell you. So, Jim, during your career, did you ever have to like go on undercover, learn how to surf, and then because maybe like there was a group of bank robbers dressed up as ex-presidents? Anything like that ever happen?
No, I mean, when you're on
Johnny Utah.
I would have different identities sometimes, and and sometimes you would have to do things you didn't know very well, or but it was par for the course.
But did you do like Johnny Utah and say, "I am a CIA agent"? No, I'm just kidding.
No. John will tell you that we strive to be little gray men.
I know.
And, yes, just fade into the background.
I am kidding with you. Of course, we always start with something really stupid, and hopefully you get it. But, that one may have been even too dumb for you. Jim, it is an honor to have you. And I have a question here for you from
All right.
I have a question here for you, and sometimes I'll yield a question to one of our friends of the show, our cab fam. There's a gentleman from the UK, Davy Johnson, who says, Jim, Yeah, you've described experiencers as being voyagers at the forefront of an expansion or evolution of consciousness. Alongside this and the moves that we are seeing in terms of disclosure of the subject, do you think that the phenomenon is playing a part in increased interest in the subject, or do you think this may be an example of not only anthropocentrism, but maybe even currentism, and that our understanding and interaction with the phenomenon has remained the same for centuries and will remain the same?
Wow, that's a great question, and
Kid's
let me
great.
see if I can unpack it a little bit. Uh, the answer, the short answer is I don't know, and I don't know anybody who does know. I mean, one of the big things that you deal with when you're dealing with the phenomenon is this is just this whole idea of conjecture. Everybody, comes at it, from their own viewpoint, and we look at it anthropomorphically because we have to. I mean, we're humans. Some of us have certain backgrounds, religious backgrounds, or maybe psychological backgrounds, military backgrounds, whatever the story, intelligence backgrounds, whatever the story. We try to look at it through this lens. From my reading of the literature, and I've read quite a bit. I mean, I do suffer from literary amnesia. I mean, I read books and I have to go back and read them again. I think I'm back to reading John Keel for like the third or fourth time. His whole bunch of books. I love him. I think he's great. But no, I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it could go either way. I mean, does the phenomenon basically direct us? And is it directing us now? There's a lot to be said for that, in the sense that, it's my opinion. Well, it's not even my opinion. I mean, this is real. The phenomenon is real, and it appears to be able to impose itself on us, on our the way we see things, the way we see it. I know Jacques Vallée talks a lot about that, and on the cover of his, I think, Passport to Magonia, is the new cover, the new Passport to Magonia. He has, the masks in front of the graves, in front of and you sort of look at that and that scenario, and you don't know who to trust. I mean, you can't trust it.
Right.
I was chatting with Robert Hastings not too long ago, and I mentioned something to him about, I'm gonna bury this stuff. I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. I was frustrated, very, very frustrated, because the phenomenon doesn't really introduce itself to us. I mean, does it? I mean, it teases us. It will lie to us. Sometimes maybe it will tell us the truth, but there's no consistency to it. There's no formality to it. There's no formal introduction to it. And I believe that's true across the government. I don't know if anything is going to change in the future. The only thing I will say, and I think it's apparent to everybody here, that we certainly have been engaging with it a lot more in the last 80 years, and particularly in the last 20, would lead us to believe that perhaps something is going to happen. Some of the people I chat with who deal with this, mentioned that they feel like maybe something is going to be happening soon. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I know that I don't trust it. I know it can, it can has a bad side to it, not a big bad side, but a little bit of bad side to it. Whether that's one species or two species out of 20, I have no clue. But I don't know. I mean, it's funny. I in some of my podcasts, that I do, and I must sound like a Looney Tune. Because I don't know what else I don't know what to say. I mean,
Not at all.
I just
Not at
don't. And some of my, some of the briefings I had a few years ago on this, at least a classified element to it. It was just, there weren't any answers. It wasn't like, somebody was telling me, here's the answer, you know what I mean? And, the Anunnaki are here and blah, 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 blah. And you go on and on. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was actually just, this is all this stuff that's happening out there. This is very, very real. You see the pictures, you see the data, and then you go, holy cow, we're living in a reality here that is sort of closed off to us. A lot of it is closed off to us. So I tend to be rambling, so I apologize. But that's the best I can do with that answer, I guess, at the moment. I'm not as eloquent as Mr. Ramirez here, who's who I really truly admire. I mean, he sent me a slide deck about a year ago on the government, and I just was like blown away by it. I was going like, holy cow. I wish I had the brains to do it. But see, he was an analyst, and the analysts really are the guys, the smart guys, right? And not only was he an analyst, he was a DS&T analyst. It's like, holy cow,
we always admire people who have I'm sorry. We always admire people who have this different talent and skill set than we have. That's what's inspiring. And what I want to say before I pass it over to my co-conspirator Nathan is that I'm also inspired and empowered, I think, as because you and other experiencers have said you were able to put your metaphorical foot down and say, no, I don't want this at this time. And you were able to push back on the phenomenon. And I think for people that are having an experience that maybe they're uneasy about, and David Lanier also has espoused that. And I'm glad that you were able to do that. That is inspiring.
Thank you. Well, Stuart Davis is, I think, a believer in that, and he's another wonderful, wonderful guy. And I happen to share his opinions on this. I don't like being controlled. Who does, right? But I don't like that. I don't like this concept, and it's highly bothersome. And it's not just bothersome to me; it's bothersome to a lot of people. You have this whole idea of sovereignty, and I'm sure you've all read that article by Alexander Wendt, the Ohio State University professor on UFOs and sovereignty. But it's a wonderful article, and but it's true. And we all sort of like order in our lives, and we want to have some kind of a say in how we conduct our lives. And then all of a sudden, this phenomenon pops in, and basically, I think what it's telling us is no, that's. You may think you do, but we can control this. So interesting stuff,
I definitely, and inspiring. I wrote that one down so that I can read that because I haven't read that. But my co-creator Nathan, take it away, sir.
Thanks. So Jim, you kind of touched on this issue, and it's something that I've been thinking about for quite some time now. I'd love to get your thoughts on it, and maybe John, if you want to weigh in as well. But because I'm sure you've thought about it. So this issue of trust, this issue of how do we go about trusting a thing, which, one, as you said, it's pretty elusive. We're having a hard time really even kind of getting our hands around it. But two, which seems to surpass, many of our abilities, many of our technological abilities, our cognitive abilities, it kind of knows what's happening before we're even aware of what's going to happen. Have you put some thought into kind of thinking through what would we do, or what would we be looking for to kind of develop a trust with whatever this is? Are we really hoping for more overt, open contact for that to happen? Is there something that you think is a prerequisite for us being able to really have a meaningful kind of trusting relationship with it?
Well, that's another good question. There has to be some kind of understanding of what this is before we can actually have a relationship with it. And frankly, I think we're at the point now that most people who are heavily involved in this, at least in the government, understand that this is real. And I think Congress now knows it's real. I mean, this whole nonsense about, China and Russia and it's all this. No. It's not man-made. It isn't. Everybody knows it in the government. It's this nonsense. It is definitely something else. And, what that is, we don't really know. But, I remember Jacques Vallée, when he came to my house once, once people found out about the experience my wife and I had, and immediately afterwards, he flew out to see me and my wife, and spent the day with us and took photographs and what have you. But we had a really nice conversation, and I had already read all of his books, and I asked him over lunch, and I said, really, Jocko, what do we do with this? I mean, and he said to me, he said it's extraordinarily complex, and he says, I don't know what to tell you. He said, and he used this thing about an iPhone. He said, you have your iPhone? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, take it out to a pasture and throw it in front of a cow and have a conversation. And that's about where we are with this. So, once again, I go back to, if there's going to be any relationship with the phenomenon in any way, shape, or form, there has to be a level of trust there. There has to be some kind of opening that where the phenomena would say, this is who we are, or this is what we are. And whether that's an intelligence, and maybe like a Gaia type intelligence or universal type intelligence, that's certainly a possibility. Or whether, it's like Jung talked about, it is, our own psychic disequilibrium, projecting out of our, our subconscious, and what we're actually seeing is, as ourselves, putting ourselves out there, wishing for our new myth, to come in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the case, because I think these things are very real. I think this is very real, but what it is it one, or is it 20 different entities? Is it one entity that masks itself in 20 different guises? But my big problem is, how do you connect this? I mean, if you do near-death studies, I was my wife and I was at the IANS conference, International Association Near-Death, experiencers, in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, a couple of years ago, and we had the chance to meet with Eben Alexander and other experiencers there. And when you listen to them, and then you read Kenneth Ring, and you look at all that, and you say, well, okay, how does that play into this? How does mystical experiences, religious mystical experiences, play into this? How does the work of Michael Newton, Destiny of Souls, play into this? I mean, where we go after we die, and our soul groups, things along those lines. Because in a way you can look at this and you can say, well, I use this analogy of the great chain of being, that maybe this phenomenon sits in there somewhere, and that it's not quite as powerful as we think it is. But in the end, when we all die and we go to some place, is that really the end or the answer? And that the phenomena is just basically like a bunch of jinn screwing with us, and I always think it is the jinn, to be honest with you, because if you read the literature on the jinn, and this is essentially what it amounts to, right? These are, spiritual beings who have good sides and bad sides to them. They're much like we are. So I don't know. I mean, I that's my train of thought on this. But I don't see any opening coming. I mean, anytime soon. I just don't. I mean, they're toying with us. It's toying with us, whatever it is.
One question I have following that, and we're going to pass it to Deb is next, is that the fact that you were able to push back and get the phenomenon to perhaps stop interacting as you wanted it to stop, does that mean it's capable of an emotion or a feeling of respect? Does it respect you more, or was it just they sensed that there was a pushback and then it was just a response?
Well, that's really an excellent question also too, because I always use this example. Chris Bledsoe is a very dear friend of mine, and we all know his story. When I first heard his story from his own lips, it was probably one of the most frightening things I've ever heard, for both he and his son, who was with him during this. There are very, very interesting elements to it. The translucent beings, the lady appeared, and then what happened afterwards to Chris. But what happened to Chris was it was a frightening experience that turned into really a spiritual awareness. And John Mack talks a lot about this whole idea of having these experiences and then having it change your life for the better. Then you look at me and my wife. We've always been very spiritually oriented, my wife and I. We're not atheist, and we're definitely not religious in the least. But we generally tend to believe in a greater good that's out there and what have you. But I saw my experience a lot differently. I mean, the anger has not left. All right. Wow. Because I'm looking at this. I mean, it's like this didn't teach me anything. I don't think about spirituality, about changing myself. I was already a climate activist. I was already a decent guy. I believed in Aldous Huxley's, idea of kindness and compassion and love and things along those lines. And I try to live my life according to this. So I'm trying to think of myself, what in God's name was it trying to tell me? But all it did was, created this human rights violation of the highest order on both me and my wife, where we had issues after that experience. So I'm not happy about it, and I'm not the only one either. I mean, there are many people who had the same kind of deal. You look at Alex, I guess they call him, in Skinwalker Ranch in the books. I know him very well. We're friends. He's a nice, wonderful guy.
Sorry, did you mean Axelrod, Jim?
Pardon me?
Is it Alex or Axelrod? Is it
Axelrod? I mean Axelrod. Yeah,
sure. No problem.
And Axelrod, I met him at the Pentagon the first time, and sort of heard his story. But when you look at that, it's not good. It's not good for children to be, treated like that. I mean, a wolf showing up, in their backyard, scaring the living shit out of two of their children and their wife, things along those lines. So you look at that and you say, well, okay, what aspect of the phenomenon is that? And what is that teaching some 15-year-old, besides, the world's a very strange place and it might not be all good. Yeah, great. But all they got to do is go to a cancer ward at St. Jude's. They're going to see the same damn thing. You're going to learn the same damn lesson. Right. So I'm very much, I could be swayed, obviously, but I'm very much not of the opinion, like a lot of my friends are. I think most of my friends are, that this might be a very, very good thing. It might be. I mean, but for me, I don't see that. And if it's 10% bad or 20% bad, then that to me means it's not good. All right. Yeah.
Given their power, their technological and consciousness influence, it's a significant number, even at that low number. Debs.
Yeah, it's the old religious conundrum. God works in mysterious ways, so we can't question him. Oh, really? He watches 6 million Jews die and 20 million Ukrainians die, and then 1 million or 2 million, Cambodians die, and you watch that, and and you say, well, I mean, I hate to sound like a college sophomore, discussing philosophy, but it's a very real scenario, right? I mean, you're looking at that and you're saying, like, well, okay, the God thing I got over with a long time ago. I said, but the phenomena thing, it's the same deal in a way. This thing has the ability to do what it does, and yet it's not offering us anything. It isn't. The military wants to weaponize this. The intelligence community wants to weaponize this. There isn't any. This is why we moved it out. TTS. By the way, we're now To the Stars Inc. We're not To the Stars Academy anymore. But this is one of the reasons why Lou left and everybody else left. It is because we wanted to basically make it something that that the public owns, that the public has to find out what the answer to this is, not the military. I'm a big fan of the intelligence community and the military in many respects. I wish them Godspeed on trying to figure out what this is, but I don't expect anything from the government on this to come out. The government exists solely for the defense of the United States. They're not, here and to be the UFO directorate or something like that. That's not their deal. So they're not going to feel compelled to tell the American public anything. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, right? They're just basically going to figure out what they need to know, to defend the United States of America. If indeed there's a reason what we need to, we may not, have to. But, so we need to have, a concerted effort. I was out at a think tank out in California last year, about 10 months ago, where it was about 20 of us, and we had a really, really good meeting. Some journalists, scholars, experiencers, things along those lines, and we discussed, the need to create something like, an institution that studies this, and sort of I laid out a sort of an outline of what that would take, how much money that would cost, and what you would need to do it. Because I think there is a way we can at least locate some dots to try and later on connect. Because right now I don't. I mean, you can say we have dots, and that they're not connected. I'm not even sure we have dots because I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether the dots are actually real, and so again, I apologize for rambling a little bit here. But.
That's great.
It's okay. We're happy to. This is very intelligent rambling. Deb, you have your first question for Mr. Semivan.
I do. Thank you.
Please call me Jim. Yeah,
Jim.
Long
Sorry.
gone. Yeah.
Okay, Jim.
Namaste.
So I am fascinated by the books on the shelf behind you, and I could not help but notice in large letters there's a book about DMT. And as a result, I am now reading DMT, the spirit molecule.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you think that there could be a component there that has to do with how experiencers might be getting manipulated.
Wow. Yeah. I was a fan of Terrence McKenna and his brother and their little expeditions, into ayahuasca and other drugs, magic mushrooms, psilocybin, things along those lines. And I can't remember the psychiatrist's name who was working on DMT. Strassman. Yeah, Richard. But if you listen to Strassman doesn't really say like this is the God molecule or this is really what's going to. He basically says this is just what it is. I mean, it's just a molecule that basically or an enzyme or a chemical that allows us to go into an area of the brain that appears to allow us to get into consciousness very, very quickly. And for not very long period of time. Those kind of highs don't last very long, maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes. But this goes back to this whole idea that Gary Nolan, who's a dear friend, but he talks about the claudate and putamen. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right in the brain.
Claudate, putamen.
Yeah. And and looking at that, and there are no conclusions on that right now, and he wouldn't say that there would be any kind of really connection, but it is interesting. I'm part of that cohort study, my wife and I, and that where they're looking at our DNA and God knows everything else, and they have our whole medical history and what have you, but. I mean, there could very well be. I mean, the brain, don't forget, I mean, as we all know, this is a filter, right? It's a filtering system. Our ability to see what we see is very limited. In hearing, our senses are very, very limited. And so the brain doesn't allow us to basically become aware with a capital A, right? It can't, because we couldn't handle the awareness. Get in a car and drive a car. If you actually sat there, and everything that was going on, in your body that helps you drive that car, if that really came into your system, you'd be completely overloaded. You'd probably collapse and die. I mean, there's no way you can understand the breathing, the blood flow, the synapses going on in different parts of the brain, the muscle memory involved, and how that all works. How could you possibly keep that in your head or anything for that matter. How could you possibly do that? So what's happening is, we're limited by who we are as humans, but yet we have this spark. We have this self-consciousness that seems to me to be leaking a little bit into a cosmic consciousness, a la Richard Buck would talk about, that allows many of us, to look into this, to look into consciousness and what have. I remember Lou Elizondo talking about, I asked him once, I said, what do you think, the answer is going to be found? And he said, well, somewhere between the nexus of quantum mechanics and consciousness. And I think he's right. I think if you look at two places, that's probably where it's going to be. But consciousness, the hell? I mean, I haven't read anything yet that convinces me that it's local, non-local. I'd lean that way, but I haven't seen anything else. But then again, if you look at near-death experiences, things along those lines, well, what does that mean? It may very well be non-local, which I think it probably is. But how does that connect to this phenomenon? And I don't know. Or are they separate?
I feel like you answered for me, because now I'm going to lean towards a stress response. So that's why we get the DMT response. It's a stress response, which is what DMT apparently is helping with. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, the dopamine receptors in the brain, things along those lines. I mean, it's brain chemicals. What do they do? When Eben Alexander, was essentially brain dead, his brain was absolute mush. He had there was absolutely no way he could have recovered from that. But yet the brain shut down, much like the brain shuts down when you're given anesthesia, right? It's one of the best sleeps you'll ever have. Get a colonoscopy. If you haven't got one, get one every 10 years. But it's the best sleep you ever have when you come out of it, because you're just completely cut off. All right. So, and then some people say, well, because of that means that we're not, that the brain doesn't go. In other words, the consciousness doesn't go anywhere. I don't know. Maybe not. But what happens when Eben Alexander left his body, had that experience that he had, right, is just absolutely incredible. And from what he told my wife had lunch with him, I think a couple times. He wasn't able to talk about some of the things he saw, some of the alien kind of things he saw, and he didn't put it in the book. But I don't want to speak for him, but nevertheless, there might be something there.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to pass it over to your colleague and friend, Mr. John Ramirez.
Hey, Jim. I just wanted to get your take on this sudden rush that we seem to be feeling, whereas for the last 7 decades, you absolutely heard little or nothing from government. And within the last several years, there's a rush of information coming out. And now we have legislation in Congress that compels the department and the agencies in the intelligence community to come forward with information. Why do you think that is? Are we rushing towards some occurrence that the government might know about? What is causing all of this to happen?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, remember in 1947, the military, the Air Force came out and the Air Force said, this phenomenon is real, right? Then the agency got involved with the Air Force, and there was absolutely no way, particularly after Pearl Harbor, that CIA and the Air Force were going to let this drop just because, quote unquote, they didn't know what it was and that they weren't going to have a program. Yeah, I think Blue Book, Grudge, all these things, they were just covers. They were just something for the public. But I think that's where the legacy programs lie. They've been going on for a long, long time, and I think they're extraordinarily hard to get to, but they're there, and they're there because they have to be there, because they really can't let this go. I know this, and John, you know this too. I mean, when when we found out in the I think 60s or 70s, the Russians were fooling around with remote viewing, what was the first thing we did? CIA went right out and hired Hal Puthoff. Hey, did it for 20 years, 20 years, right? Funding this thing, and they canned the program in 1997. I was there when they canned it. I happened to be, just by serendipity. But I remember the guy who canned it and responsible, a very senior guy in the DS&T, and he told me, he said, look, it works. There's no question remote viewing works. He said, we just can't explain it. So he said, how do you go to the president? How do you do an intelligence assessment? And then when the president said, okay, the Russians have this, new submarine or whatever, new missile they built. And he said, well, this guy went out on his silver cord and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's just not going to go. So that doesn't mean when I say can the program that the program's absolutely gone. That means it's usually going to get picked up by somebody else. But usually what the agency does is a reaction to what other people do. Now, getting back to your question, John, so you have this movement, and since nobody knows what it is, and since in the early days they truly were worried about it for all kinds of reasons, more mundane reasons, like telecommunications and stuff was really crappy and they didn't want to get everybody all wound up. And then they started this stupid ass phony crap that they, had the media do and that they were doing about, and they just did an enormous disservice to all these experiencers. It was just disgustingly awful. And, when you think back on it, all these poor people who had these experiences and they made fun of them. Oh, anyway, so that's all going on. And this is where you have to sort of credit Lou, because even though you had people like you involved in this, well, you guys were too young for the 60s, but in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and you had guys like George Knapp and Jacques Vallée, they're pushing all this, and Richard Dolan and even Stephen Greer, going after this full force. Robert Hastings, there's dozens and dozens of these people, but it is in the background. It's in the background because nobody came out and nobody said anything in the military. And then when the military did come out, it was when they did have these little things like Greer put on one, Robert Hastings put on, it just didn't connect with anybody. Nobody really paid it any attention because this whole tradition of disbelief, there's this whole idea that the press and the media and the military put out saying, yeah, it's all a bunch of horse crap, right? That was so strong, no one was able to break it until Mr. Elizondo decided. I was there. I mean, I chatted with him about this, and he told me he was going to leave, and we talked about the films and what have you, and he told me what he was going to do, and I sort of half-heartedly cautioned him against it because he was a very senior officer, and he was young, maybe late 40s, and he easily could have jumped, I think, into the senior ranks. But he decided to leave, and because he felt so strongly about this. So I introduced him to Tom, or put him together with Tom, and then Tom hired him for TTSA right away. And then Christopher Mellon, in the meantime, Tom had called Chris, and then Chris came in. So, these are really two guys, Chris Mellon and Lou, that I think everybody needs to tip their hat to them because they really sort of jumped out there on this. And when we decided we were going to figure out how we were going to push this, it was a concerted effort. Tom backed this whole thing, Tom DeLonge, and I give him an enormous amount of credit. People sort of make fun of him because he's a rock musician, and he make dick jokes all the time and what have you, but when you talk to the man, he's nobody's fool, man. He is one smart guy. He very well read on the topic. He knew what he wanted to do. He went out and he did it. He did it so well that the FBI is talking to him now, trying to figure out how he did it. And yeah, I mean, he's actually going to be talking to a whole group of people at the FBI Academy pretty soon. on this. And so I give him a lot of credit for actually putting all that stuff together. And then, but the big thing, John, was Lou and Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon went after this. I mean, Lou and Chris sort of, went together, and then they sort of split a little bit, and then they went, I went to the agency and the DNI and all these other places to let them know, don't arrest us. We're not going classified on this, but we are doing this. They were okay with that. And then Chris went into Congress, and boy, I'll tell you, he was a guy, he was a staff director of CISI, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He knew everybody. And then, of course, when he became the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, that was a whole nother thing. Chris ran all the SAP programs in the government. He ran, well, actually in the military, I should say. He didn't know about this program, about ATIP or OSAP. Didn't know about it. He wasn't happy. So when he went to Congress, and he got Congress briefed, and then Lou was able to arrange a lot of this too with the Navy. And don't forget that this program, that came out, and when the New York Times thing came out, it was me, Lou, Chris, and Hal Puthoff had met with Leslie Kean at the Ritz-Carlton, where we sort of let her know, and she was taken aback since we were all senior people, and so she had to take it seriously. And I was dumbfounded when the New York Times came out with that. Of course, I told Leslie, and I will answer your question, John, I promise. But
we're getting there.
But I remember when it came out on that fateful day, the story was wrong. And I got a hold of Leslie and I said, it's not about $22 million and the Pentagon has a UFO program. It's about there's an entity out there. There's some kind of non-human intelligence that's living with us on this fucking planet. I'm sorry, I'm getting all wound up. That's the story. And she said they wouldn't let me run it like that. And it's still very, very difficult. So I give the New York Times a lot of credit for running this story, but for missing the big point. We're not alone, and we never have been alone. And I think that's what Chris Mellon got across when he got the Navy. And again, the Navy is a very, very small part of this. The Navy is just this one little small program that they started because they were seeing all this stuff right on the East Coast and the West Coast and with the carrier groups, and that's how this all started. But that wasn't the real program. I mean, that's part of it, but when the Congress saw the classified briefings, saw what I saw, they were dumbfounded. They wanted to know. They were angry, and they still are angry. Why weren't we told? Why did we know about this? Now, John can attest to this. This goes back a ways. This whole idea of keeping this hidden, because I personally believe there were, and I still believe to this day, from everything I know, there are no answers in the sense that the government, the IC in particular, and the military have no answers. They really, truly have no answers. They may have material, they may have other things, but that doesn't mean they know what it is that they're holding. That doesn't mean they understand this. This is, it was described to me as, very well beyond our ken. Now, a couple of people have come out recently and said, well, we're maybe they're maybe 100 years ahead of us. Nah, I think
a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, these things, I mean, UAPs are, when they talk about the nuts and bolts, UAPs aren't even a story at all. UAPs are just like a sideshow. I mean, it's just this stuff that shows up, right? But it's not it. I mean, it's a manifestation of it. But you notice these things, they're out there, they're actual physical, but then all of a sudden they're not physical. This is what Jock talks about, flying objects. He said, hell, I don't even know if they're flying or they're objects, because they're objects, they're not objects. They just disappear at will. They're able to do incredible stuff. But are they just showing off? Are they just presenting us a show? What's actually behind that is what really matters. And when what's really behind that are the encounters. What's really behind that, and this is where I really credit Lou and Chris for making sure that the Gillibrand Amendment puts in the biological, the social, socio-cultural, and the psychological aspects of this, because that's where this is. That's where Jacques Vallée talks a lot about. That's what this is. This is some kind of a control mechanism that seems to be guiding us somewhere or pushing us in some direction here. So it's not about UAPs. UAPs are a sideshow as far as I'm concerned. But the military is interested in because, wow, they can do really cool stuff. I remember Steve Justice looking at, when we were all watching the videos at TTS headquarters in Encinitas before the videos came out. I remember Chris. I asked
Steve.
Steve, who probably had his hands on more super classified, data, being with the Skunk Works, right? And he helped design all these aircraft and what have you. And I said, "What did you think?" And he said, "I want to build it. I want to build something that has that." I mean, a typical engineer, right? That's what I want to do. I want to build that. And he sketched out this really beautiful, and I wish we were able to do it, but I don't think he's able to. But he sketched out this beautiful aircraft of what it would look like with an anti-gravity system put on it and things along those lines. It was just absolutely gorgeous. He's a very talented designer, So, but yeah, I mean, that's so I think there was a turning point, and the turning point was the New York Times article, and then once that turning point hit, then all the backstories, all the people that were doing this for decades and devoted their lives to it, the people whose shoulders we stand on, right? These are the people that came into focus then, and then they started talking more about it. They're helping push this thing forward. So just because, John, my personal feeling is just because this has come out in the public, and I don't think this is a harbinger of the phenomenon becoming more, becoming closer to us, or becoming more. Where we're getting to a point where we're going to be understanding. I just don't. I just think we just basically are talking about it more. But I don't see any opening. The only thing I will say, I've been in touch with the task force and what have you, and they really are just truly getting started on this. But they're primarily made up of scientists, and my point to them, and I keep telling them, you need religious scholars, you need psychologists, you need people with a very strong background in this that goes back, 2 or 3 or 400 years or 2,000 years. You got to go back to Sumerians, right? You got to go back to all the ancient religious texts. All this stuff has to be taken into account when you're looking at this phenomenon, because it's all there. Then you got to get some really powerful databases, and I know this is what Bigelow is doing with BASS, and I would love to have my hands on those databases they have. And Jacques Vallée designed them, and he's like, the creme de la creme when it comes to that. Extremely bright man. But some of this stuff's already set up and ready to go. I'm hopefully they might find something, a little needle in the haystack, or a little bit of signal in the noise, that we could start, and then maybe get somewhere with this before the end of my lifetime, but I'm not holding my breath. John, does that answer you? I don't know.
Thank you, Jim.
I'm a typical DO officer, John. I got a point here, and I just go all over the place, and I'm back.
Bob Bigelow, if you're listening, please give Jim Semivan access to your database. Thank you very much. This program is brought to you by Caudate Pataman Chevrolet, Ohio's favorite Chevrolet dealer. And now, on to our UAP experiencer, Steph.
Jim and John, what a surprise to see you. So great to see you both. I'm an experiencer, as my title says. And in 1985, my entire family had witnessed UAP. Now, we were in the aerospace business. We actually provided the honeycomb pins to one of the Apollo projects. So at a very young age, I had the proper knowledge of how to identify a helicopter, an airplane, a stealth bomber, all of these different things that we grew up with, all of these models sitting around our business. And so my concern is, yes, we've already established that UAP are real. Now, the general public outside of us, because I feel that we're a little bit different, set aside from the people who aren't following the topic, how would they now not inundate the authorities after, say, they witness a satellite or a weather balloon? How would they go ahead and report this to, say, an Air Force base, such as what my family had done? We knew to report it to the proper authorities. Now, how would you go about putting out, say, a public service announcement through the government stating, these are weather balloons, this is a satellite, if you see these items, please do not contact our office? How would you go about initiating that so that people aren't inundated with false reports?
Yeah. Wow. The short answer is I don't know. Probably 2 or 3 times a week. I sometimes through LinkedIn, sometimes through people getting my email. They will send me videos, some really rather compelling videos, mostly orbs. Sometimes you'll see like a saucer-shaped object. And some of them are in a panic. They don't know what to do about it. They're,
Sure.
and some families are involved and what have you.
Yes.
The scarier ones are the orbs, because there's not a lot of literature on the orbs, and they are very dangerous. And you don't invite them in. I always like to say, they get close, say something to the orbs and stay away, or get in the house or get away from them. They're quite dangerous. And they could be almost anything. They have morphed. We have a lot of literature on them morphing into, beings, sometimes morphing into ships, coming together with other orbs, things along those lines. But there is no central clearinghouse for any of this. MUFON is the only place. I mean, I tell people to go to MUFON and do that. TTS has 2 databases. One's called Vault and one's called Scout, and essentially they're all built in there, and they're the AI databases. And one of our board of advisors members actually developed these. He's a big IT guy from Price Waterhouse, and he built these in conjunction with Amazon and Microsoft. They're all built, and what they were ready to do, what we were ready to do, was actually start accepting people's videos, photographs, things along those lines. And we had a high degree of certainty that we would be able to run them through our databases and be able to tell whether they were real or not real. And if they were real, then we had our lines that were going to the government, but it would be all unclassified, so everybody would have access to it. Then we would have our own database on a website where people could actually go in and do their own research if they wanted to, So you're not waiting for the government to do anything, taking it on for yourself. But when we had those set up and we went to the cloud services to find out when we can start, and they told us the amount of money it was going to cost, we simply couldn't do it. Let me give you an example here of how difficult, why this is so difficult, and why it's absolutely critical if we really want to go any place, that we need to get some kind of institution set up. I had a friend on LinkedIn tell me they're going to be starting one of these, trying to start one of these institutions. And then I had another a guy who contacted me on LinkedIn who was really sort of upset why we didn't have it already, and he had these pretty good ideas of how they were going to do it. And I told both of them, I said, look, you don't know how much money this costs. It is extraordinarily expensive. Yuri Milner gave SETI $100 million over a period of 20 years, where he's going to fund, so they're sitting. I mean, God bless them. I hope they find something, But I would love to tell Seth Shostak, they're here. They're here.
Yes.
They're already here. We can do something here. He is a total skeptic. I think a debunker, actually, because that's what he sounds like to me. But he just not going to go there. But to actually get the data together, structured and unstructured data, and put it in, into a form where you're able to look at it. And then you have the right type of analysts. You'd want a John Ramirez there. You'd want about a dozen John Ramirez's there because he's really talented, and he knows they know what to do, right? And then you get some religious scholars there, and you get everybody in there, and now you're paying all these people. Nathan. And you're looking at minimum, maybe 10 to 15 million per year, and that's a small organization. And then if it's going to be interactive, you need a website, an interactive website. One of the things we thought about was the possibility of crowdsourcing it, where you would take a university, and some universities now are allowing graduate students to specialize in UAP studies or in the phenomenon, things along those lines. And then be hiring grad students to do this, run the data through and do the research and what have you. But running data through a database doesn't necessarily mean you're going to come up with an answer. I mean, you have to be careful about the data you actually send through, and it has to coincide with the data that comes out. In other words, it's just not that simple. It's a very, very difficult task to actually get something that makes sense, that you could put your imprimatur on it. So that's what TTS was supposed to be about. And because we became a public benefit corporation because we wanted to donate 10 to 15% of the money we would be making through entertainment or research or whatever the story is, merchandising, and throw that into the research. And we thought that would be enough. It's nowhere near enough. Mm-hmm. And then when we thought we would have all these investors coming in, we did. We got 4,000 investors, but they're all mom and pop investors for the most part. $500, $300. It's great to have them on board, but we need so much more than that. And that was an eye opener for me and for Tom. And Tom had already put millions into this, company already. And you know what I mean? And I told him, don't, you can't do any more. I mean, it's just, right. Unless we have something big happening, and we're working on it, and we have some stuff going on. So I'm very optimistic that we might see some, but we do need something like, Avi Loeb, right? He started the Galileo project. I'd be very curious to see how much money he has, and I'll guarantee you he doesn't have much. He doesn't have anything near what he needs to do to put these UAP sensors and telescopes where he wants to put them. Right. If he did, he'd do it.
I was going to mention Avi also. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Avi, can you please send your balance sheets to Jim Semivan, please, so he can take a look. So we got Robert Bass, we got our Bigelow, and we got Avi. You guys owe some material to Jim Semivan. But anyway, Jim, regarding the orbs and the danger associated with them, do you think perhaps the little spray bottle to get the cat off your leather sofa, would that work against the orbs, do you think?
No.
I'm kidding. All right, I'm kidding.
You're kidding.
All right, we don't have that much time left with you, so we want to do some quick hitters here to get a couple more questions. Can we do sort of a rapid fire-ish round?
Okay.
Unless you're going to give us more than 1 hour. So it's
I can probably give you, another 15 or 20 minutes.
All right, that'll really help out. But we'll still try to get it rapid because I know Nathan's got more stuff. I mean, we have the religious scholar, we have the analyst down below. I can analyze flight characteristics. We're ready to build this database, man. We got it. But anyway, Jim, so a friend of ours, Vinny Adams, who I know you're familiar with, of Disclosure Team, and British journalist Professor David Clark put out the amazing Calvine photo of a craft. Right. Clark was quoted in Newsweek as saying, Aurora, top secret reconnaissance aircraft, which the U.S. Was rumored to be building in the 1980s, though was never any evidence of such a project, and the U.S. government has consistently denied its existence. Jim, you saw that photo. And so some people are saying it's black U.S. tech, and I'm curious what your take is on that.
I don't have an opinion on it. The way I look at photos is I need, an optical physicist to look at that and tell me that it's real. That's what I would say. This is one of the reasons why we wanted to start Scout and Vault, so we could actually look at it and say, yes, that is absolutely real. and because as you know, I mean, there hadn't been very many very clear pictures of UAPs. Now, if you talk to Robert Hastings, and he'll tell you that there have been instances where they have flown over nuclear test sites, and people have taken pictures up close and personal. I had an interesting, but and Robert, Hastings always talks about the meh response, right? And it's like it's how people who have cameras around their neck don't end up taking pictures of them, or you're driving down the road and everybody sees a UFO and or UAP and they go wow, and then they get back in the car and they don't talk about it, and is what Robert calls the meh response, and it's happened to me. I mean, when my wife and I had our experience. I mean, my wife was very ill after that. So we were focusing on that. But after that, we were like, it wasn't something we were running with our hair on fire. It just 20 some years, over 20 years, it took us to really, sort of focus on it. So, and I always tell Tom this too. I said, everybody has a narrative. Everybody wants to tell you a story, their story. And that story is probably true. But all it is a narrative. I mean, you can't take it to court. It's essentially hearsay. It's subjective. Science is too closed off to accept something like that. Anecdotes. So where you go to with that is where like Jacques goes to, and some of these anthropologists talk about the field-centric model. You have to go where it is. Because it's not reliable and it's not predictable, right? So, so what do you do with that? Well, you do what Jane Goodall did, you sit there and you watch the apes, right? And then, but where the hell are you going to sit there and watch it? So, and with Jacques' new book with Paulo Harris, the Trinity, it was beautifully done. I mean, that's exactly what you need to do. I mean, he went in there and he and Paula, and they basically spent all the time they needed. And they came out, they didn't come up with answers per se, but they did come up with a lot of good data. And I think that's where the future is in all of this, is really mining the data and then verifying the data. Now, I will say that I am hoping that the photographs that do exist in the government up close do come out. You're hoping for that, but think about that for a second. Right now, I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and they were asking me, well, why isn't this like, because I had said, I always say it's a story of the millennium. And people say, well, why isn't, and I live in a little neighborhood here, a bunch of old people. Nobody is interested in this.
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
You walk into a room with 100 people, you might get one or two people that have heard about it. But this little bubble we live in, they talk about liberal bubbles, conservative bubbles, and all this kind of stuff. This is a UAP bubble. It's not that many people, and it's just, it's not. I mean, John Alexander used to talk about this. He said it's not on the top 10, the top 20, probably the top 50 things that people are worried about in their lives. They're worried about, inflation, taxes, their kids, health issues, things along those lines. UAPs phenomenon, it's just not there. They get a kick out of it, I think, reading about it, and they're fascinated by it. Like, yeah, but it's like not high on their list. They're not going to give money to it, and Congress is willing to give the task force money, but I will tell you, I know what the budget is, and it's not that much.
Right,
not that much. The only good thing that came out of that was there's more than one task force, and everybody wants to get involved in it, and because the money's there.
But they're gonna get free. They're going to get free data collection from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, even the Marine Corps, from all their sensor systems. You just put it out there. You will collect. You will turn that into intel when you land, and so that's free data. They don't have to field systems like Avi Loeb has to.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. So. But I what I really am hoping for is eventually we'll come to this ability where we come in and you have the phenomenon at, the whole, and then you subdivide it up into in various sections, the contact experiences, the abduction experiences, um, um, you know, the possibility of different types of aliens, the whole idea, like with John's case, being contacted very young and having that sort of continue through. I mean, when you look at that, I mean, that to me is probably one of the most fascinating aspects of the abduction experience or the contact experience. Generational. My mother-in-law, my wife's mother, is I don't know, probably about 30 or 40% Cherokee Indian. But I remember when I first met her, I mean, she's telling us, she would point up, and she's a very sound woman, a very smart woman. Yeah, I know I have babies up there, and she had these experiences.
Wow.
So I mean, it doesn't run in families. I don't know, but you look at this. Chris Bledsoe. Part of Chris Bledsoe's story, encompasses this little fascinating thing with the lady, right? Where this Blessed Virgin Mary type figure, that definitely was not the Blessed Virgin Mary. Shows up, knocks him on his ass. Well, he gets knocked on his ass by a bull that came. It wasn't really a bull, was it? But it came out of the woods behind his house. And I was at his house and I saw it and knocked him down. And then as he turned up to pick up, this vision of a lady, 3 feet high, blonde hair, blue eyes, all in white, the same exact lady that showed up at Fatima, right? And if you read Jeffrey Kripal's book, Authors of the Impossible, in the conclusion, he talks a lot about that, about Fatima and actually what was written. And there's a lot of redaction done by, the churches and culture, where they say, Lucia and who actually, when the kid just, they never said it was the Blessed Virgin Mary, right? It was the lady, and she's described exactly how Chris Bledsoe described it. And there were government people who came to visit Chris, who were very interested in the lady. And I know these government people, and they wanted to know more about it from Chris because they had seen her before.
What did you say? They have seen her?
The one where I can't remember the name of the.
Oh, Terry Lovelace?
No, not Terry Lovelace. Another one. It was a beautifully written book about a young couple, and they go out and they've had experiences that turned out their whole life, but they went camping, and they had this incredible experience out in the desert. Damn it! I wish I could remember it. It was written by a guy named Paul Roberts something or other. I got it here somewhere anyway. But what the interesting thing was, is they were being taken up into the ship. They had the small grays, and they had what Whitley calls the kobolds. These little pieces of crap about that high, really mean. And then they had the tall grays. And then as the pickup truck was being taken up, I mean, the lady again appeared, right, and told them it was all going to be, okay.
Wow.
Very, very strange stuff. So, I mean, but to have, be able to have an organization that would deal with that one aspect of it. What does that mean? Why the lady? I mean, Ingo Swann supposedly said, I think Hal told me this, that the lady, appears on the far side of the moon. What the hell that means, I don't know. But that's where when Ingo went out and actually, I think in his book Penetration, he went out and he actually saw the aliens there
on the far side of the moon.
They basically looked at him and said, "Get the hell out!" He did. Right, smartly got out. Right, So right. I'm sorry. Once again, I'm rambling, taking up your time. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. We have a religious scholar here, Nathan. Why the lady in white?
Well, it's a great question. It's a recurring motif, and I think there is something to that. Jim, it would take a long time to unpack all of that, I think, right? I think I'd be remiss in my duty here if I didn't defer some of my time to John, who has so graciously offered to join us this evening. John, I know you've got some questions for Jim, and I love this conversation. Would love to keep it going, so I give you the floor. Oh, you're on mute, though, sir.
I was monitoring the comments coming through, and I saw one of a particular interest because there's a lot of misconception about how CIA does things. And this has related to like not crash retrievals of craft, but foreign technology in general, Jim. How would the CIA go about collecting foreign technology, and how does it get delivered so that it's used to the government, whether it be the Department of Defense or if it's highly technical to academia, for example? We read in Philip Corso's book that allegedly occurred with materials from Roswell. But how does that done? I mean, if something crashed in a foreign country, and of course, we operate overseas in foreign countries. We have relationships with our partners overseas. If something unusual crashed, and it doesn't seem to be from this planet, what's the process of getting that to where it needs to go?
Yeah, well, depending if we had it would all depend on if we had a relationship with the country and the country allowed us to actually go in on their sovereign territory and actually, and pick up something and take it away. If it was Five Eyes, one of the Five Eyes, I don't think that would be a problem at all. I think we would then share the data with whoever, but whatever it would be that crashed, that would be taken. It would probably go immediately to the military, and then there's any number of military institutes and or defense contractors that work with the military. I'm thinking about Battelle, any one of the 5 major defense contractors, sometimes smaller contractors, but it would probably go to FTD first, Foreign Technology Division at Wright Pat or someplace, depending on what it was. And then the intelligence community would be brought in. CIA in particular would be brought in with DIA and try to analyze it. But once again, when you're dealing with extremely exotic technology, and it doesn't have to be UAPs, it tends to be highly classified because you don't want your enemies seeing that or even knowing that you have it. So that is going to be hidden. And now here's the problem with all this. If it's exotic technology, if it's a crashed saucer, all right, it's not just the technology, it's the fact that we're living here with non-human entities, right? And I think that's what makes everybody mad, right? The public mad and saying like, well, hell, you know what I mean? We want to know if we're not alone in the universe, right? But then the military is saying, well, how the hell do I tell them? How do I tell them that, okay, that we're not alone in the universe, but I can't prove it to them because I can't show them the technology. If I show them the technology, the Russians will know we have it. Then the Russians will do everything in their power to get it, and there's an imbalance there and all this kind of stuff. So it's a delicate tightrope. I think, I really think that the idea of hiding this is not a good one. I think that the people deserve to know. That trumps everything as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we have to know this. And if the government has this, the government really should come out and tell us. And they should also be honest with us and say, but we can't show you anything. And here's the reason why. And just be honest. Just be honest about it. And if that's possible. Now, we know that the Soviets, back when it was the Soviets and before 91, they had their own, what they call the Thread 3 program. And if you ever saw the data on that, I was familiar with some of the institutes that were working on that. Very legitimate, I thought. Just George Knapp pulled these things out in 91. He got it from a KGB, from a journalist who got it from a KGB officer, and they look absolutely real. So I believe they are credible. There's all kind of issues with that. But CIA doesn't. There's no cabal, out there. When you work for the government, and you guys, well, this, DJ. These are good people. Generally, they're good people. They're smart people, and they're trying to figure this out, and they're trying to figure out what to do with this. And somebody's saying, "Oh, they're all going to go to jail because they've known this for 7 years, and it's an intelligence failure and all this kind of stuff." Well, yeah, maybe it's an intelligence failure, but I don't know how much of an intelligence failure it is if you actually pick up a down craft and you have no damn idea what it is. You don't know how it works. You don't know anything about it. You can't figure out any material on it. You don't know anything. You can knock on it, right? You can, You don't know. And you look, maybe you find a propulsion system and you haven't a clue how it works. And not only do you have not a clue, you haven't had a clue for 70 years. So how is that an intelligence failure in the sense that what are they supposed to do? I mean, they're supposed to say, yeah, what we have is essentially a big pile of something over here, and it's clearly not from our planet, but we don't know how it works.
Hey, Jim,
at all.
if I can tangent off of this, because you were just there with what you were speaking with John, what level of disclosure does Jim Semivan think is appropriate at this particular point in time?
Don't forget, we're all looking at this from, most people are looking at this from zero, the altitude, the zero. And then maybe I'm looking at it and John's looking at it based on what we may know, some of the corollary data associated with it. We're maybe at the 3,000 foot level, right? Maybe 4,000 foot level. But I know there's a 50,000 foot level. And, you get into a lot of trouble when you start saying things like you start second guessing other people about whether they should do something or not do something. I like to give the government the benefit of the doubt on this issue because it's so complicated. I do know that there were times when groups of people would get together to talk about this, whether or not they should let whatever information they had out, and the conversations always ended up saying no. They really honestly felt no. Now, is that true now? Let me go back to that original statement I told you earlier. People, nobody cares. This isn't a big topic with most people,
right?
And I was reading these unbelievable statistics about people. 46% of the American populace, reads at the 6th grade level. Their idea of extraterrestrials or the phenomena is ET, ouch, or what they got on Independence Day, right? And then you're going to tell them, you're going to come out and you're going to tell them, okay, everything you know about God, everything you know about your church and how things work, that you were brought up with through generation after generation after generation is woefully inadequate, has nothing to do with this. As a matter of fact, you're living in a place that there is another entity out there that we can't define, that we have no relationship with, that basically can come in and out of your life at will and do whatever the hell it wants. You think about that for a second. The president comes on and he says, I can't defend against it because I don't know what it is. We see it. Is it existential? Well, it hasn't done anything yet. Existential threat. Has it done anything yet? Well, I haven't done anything yet. Doesn't mean it's not an existential threat. So that's a lot that's just a lot to digest for any human being, and particularly if it's on all the news stations and all of a sudden, will people panic? Some people will. Will you guys panic? No, you won't. You're used to this. But again, we're living in a little bubble here. I know, I go to the nursing home to visit my mother-in-law, and you start talking with some of these older patients there, and they wouldn't be able to handle this. And some of the people in Ohio where I grew up, I mean, it's not gonna play well. It won't play well.
It's better to say that Kim and Kanye just broke up, and the paper towels, the brawny pack of 12 down at Sam's Club is on sale. Nathan,
you see what I'm getting at? I mean, this is how people live their lives,
Right.
And they're not particularly intrepid at all, and they're not thinkers, in a sense, forward thinking. They don't deal with this. They don't want to deal with this. They want to have what they have. That's why we get who we get in politics.
right? It's the only people that want to do it.
I'm not going to say anything else, but that's what we get.
Do you guys mind if I just make a comment real quick?
Yes, please
I
do.
just wanted to comment. We talked about all the reasons why we haven't disclosed because it could be harmful, but I really am starting to feel not disclosing has been more harmful because we are not preparing people for the medical issues, and we are certainly not preparing our therapeutic and mental health people for the psychological issues connected to this phenomenon. So, if anyone who is listening, who's working on this, is hearing me, please be aware that as a mental health practitioner, I would really appreciate more honesty so that we can prepare the mental health professionals to help. Thank you.
Debbie, that it's just really funny. I mean, even though everything I just said, let me tell you what Chris Mellon told me once. He's a very, very bright guy, and we were talking about this, and we were talking about this whole idea of it was me, Kit, and Chris, Lou, Tom was there, Hal, and we were all chatting about this. And I remember Chris said, and he was absolutely right, and I do believe he's right. And Debbie, this goes right to your point. We were saying, well, how much responsibility are we going to have as an organization to bring this out? But there were some people that were arguing, do you want to scare, younger people by coming out with all this data and things along those lines? But Chris Mellon made the point. He said, it's already out. It's there. People are, Debbie, just like you said, I was affected by it. Chris Bledsoe was, and hundreds of thousands of people are affected by it. So you can't hide it, and you really shouldn't hide it. So I didn't want to come off as saying, I just wanted to come off and saying there's two sides of the story. But in the end, if somebody asks me, no, we have to let this out. We can't, but it's already out as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's already out. People just don't accept it. What everybody's waiting for is the government to come out and say anything. And I'm saying, what the hell are you waiting for the government to come out? They're not the least bit interested, in UFO 101. They're interested in nuts and bolts. How can I weaponize whatever the hell that is and protect the United States government? But they're not interested in explaining it to anybody. That's why we need to go out there and tell people this is real. This is what you need to do. And if there's a defense against this, like Stuart Davis talks a lot about the defensive mechanisms that you can use if you're bothered by this. We need to talk a lot more about that and get it out there. So Chris Mellon, was absolutely right on this. We need to get it out.
Yeah, and I think Jim, there's it's sort of that same thing that happens in human families, right? The human condition, for whatever reason, we all carry with us some kind of shame or something that we feel like we do that we don't want other people to know about. And if we were just to kind of lay our burdens or our feelings on the table in front of everyone, people would be like, well, I also have that issue, or I struggle with that, or there's this sense in which we're holding a lot in, and we need that permission to let things go and to kind of be voluntary with our experiences. And the way I look at this disclosure issue is that it's it really is a call and response. There is someone who goes forth, whether it be the government or someone with influence, who kind of gives permission to the herd, to say that there is a there, and then the response is probably pretty overwhelming, as I think we've been hinting at, that this is real and that many have experienced it. And I just wonder, to what degree do you think across the world, our governments is there any degree of coordination here to kind of work together to try to set the table and allow permission for this to be acknowledged?
No. Yes and no. Yes, governments, if you ask me, Five Eyes, yeah, I'm sure if there's definitely talk going on. But other governments have contacted us, and you have a problem here, and the problem is if you a government who has, say, for instance, France, very wonderfully open about this. They have a lot of data, but if they bring the data over to the U.S., essentially the French want to know what the U.S. knows. Now, if the U.S. knows a lot more, and the a lot more they know has to do with weapon systems or anything, they're not going to share it necessarily. So, that doesn't mean that shouldn't be done. I mean, it really should be done. I mean, I think there is something going on, but I think it's at a low level right now. I think Five Eyes is probably doing a lot more together, but no. but yeah, it's again, it's just the reason why we wanted to take this outside is why reason why Lou left is because we knew that the government was not the place to get this out to the public, to get this out in a proper way. It isn't. That's not how the government works. You need to take this out privately, and you need to figure this out. We need a Bill Gates, a Ford Foundation. We need to get people that are serious behind this. I mean, Bill Gates is spending a ton of money on mosquito, DNA, switching around. Fine, this is fantastic. He's saving lives, but for a lot of people, this is just too woo-woo. They don't want to go there, And it's sadly, I mean, for all of us, right? We sit here, we're spending our whole lives dealing with this, right? It's all we think about. But there aren't enough people that are concerned. There just aren't.
And I get that, but what do you think the percentage is of the population that actually has had an experience that hasn't?
I would say at least 50 to 60% in some form or fashion. Whether that probably more if you include poltergeist activity, paranormal.
Right.
Yeah. And again, my feeling isn't that this is paranormal or supernatural. This is all natural activity. We just call it supernatural because we don't understand it, but it is all part of the natural universe. It's part of our reality. So our consensus reality that we live in right now, right? It's just too constricted. It's just not true. It's not real. And it needs to open up. It's what, William James, kept calling for this radical empiricism. And by that, he meant just this idea that you can have an empiric system, but you need to have it opened up to bring this in. They proved, back the British Psychical Association around the turn of the century pretty much proved that telepathy exists, telekinesis exists, clairvoyance, things along those lines. I mean, they had plenty of evidence, to prove that this is real. Stacks and stacks of evidence. But you take it to a scientist, and actually they were scientists who proved this. But this tradition of disbelief that's been going on in our educational system forever, they just don't look at it that way. It's science is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's just incredibly wonderful. It's brought great success and in health and technology, but it doesn't accept things if it doesn't fit into the model. And the model is reliability and predictability. And if there's one thing this phenomenon is not, it's a matter of it spits at us when you try to get any reliability or predictability out of it. It gives you the big middle finger, right? Because it doesn't care. It doesn't care. That's the only excuse I have. I mean, I know now some people might say, well, it's a grander reason why it doesn't care. Well, I don't think so. I mean, I go back to the gin, right? They're fucking with us. This is what John Keel said, in Operation Trojan Horse, which I probably read 4 times already. But he called it a big paraphysical game, just a big screw you. You know what I mean? I have a chance to screw you because I have something over you, and I'm going to do it. And sometimes it's funny, most times it isn't, and sometimes it's dangerous, and sometimes it's just plain human rights violations, So, and then sometimes it works wonders, I don't know. So we'll see.
On that dark note, since you just went there, I have one dark question left. I have a light question. We got to get to.
Yeah, and I got to leave it too. Yeah. So.
Okay, let me. This question, you've said people have died over this. The phenomenon is not all good. People like Lou, yourself, Rick Doty allude to things like this. Is the phenomenon the source, in your opinion, of many missing people who have mysteriously disappeared from national parks? People such as the Tom Messick case presented by David Paulides. Is the phenomenon perhaps the source of missing people?
Certainly a possibility. I mean, I haven't not read Paulides' work, although I take it at face value that it's accurate and it's true. People disappear, too many people disappear all the time, and we don't know what happened to them. Could it be the phenomenon? Why not? I mean, what else is it? I mean, seriously, what else is it? I mean, if 100,000 people, disappear in a year or 2 years, where are the bodies?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, yeah. I mean, it could very well be, but we have no proof.
Right.
Once again,
I know,
once
right?
again, we're swimming in what Whitley Strieber calls a forest of hypotheses. We're just roaming around this forest, thinking, well, it could be this. Well, it could be that. Well, it could be this thing over here. In the end, we don't know. And this is what the most frustrating thing is about this, DJ, at least to me. And it's the reason why probably once a month I say, that's it. I'm closing shop, getting in the books, just live the rest of whatever life I have left, you know what I mean? And hang out at the beach. And I live near the beach here. So, but then I get drags me back, right?
The Michael Corleone syndrome.
Well, no, I get this LinkedIn request from this guy named DJ, and these calling all beans kind of things. And seriously, but I don't, when you look at fellow travelers, right, and I don't have anybody I talk to about this. I don't. There isn't anybody, and except my pals like John or Robert Hastings. I'm always in contact with, and Tom and things, and Kit and Hal and stuff. I can always talk to them about it, but we live far away from each other, and it's hard, and it's just hard to talk. So when you get an opportunity to talk with like-minded souls,
it's a gift.
Yeah, you do.
It truly is. Steph, do you have anything left for him, and then John, and then we'll get him out of here.
I do have one last inquiry, and my apologies, it's a bit dark as well. I'm deeply concerned for our military personnel and them being on the front lines of addressing this. And being from Southern California, being off the coast of California, having friends serve in the Navy and the military, not just heightens my awareness as well. So on the coast of Catalina, there was a recent amphibious craft of ours that unfortunately had sank, and we lost 9 of our members. Is there potential for this transmedium craft to have been altering our mechanics as they've been reported to do so? Are you able to comment on that, for one? I don't want to ask a question you're not able to.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have very much information on the transmedium vehicles. I do know from friends of mine that they that do have a little bit more knowledge, that they can't figure it out because there's no cavitation effects or supercavitation effects associated with these vehicles. They just seem to be able to do what they do, and some people believe that this whole idea of intention, are these craft intentionally damaging or taking our lives, or are our ships, instead of getting too close to them? I don't know. I think it's it's the fault of the person who knows more and who has more control. This would be the phenomenon. But I will tell you that I got a briefing on the cohort group. It used to be called the interference syndrome, and it was about 100 people. Mm-hmm. And out of that 100, we've lost about 20. And these are people who ran smack dab into the phenomenon, right? In various circumstances. My wife and I are included in that. And we lost a lot of those 20 to suicide. I saw the HIPAA restricted PowerPoint on what these people look like, what their brains look like, what their bodies look like after they were either had orb activity and a lot of this happened at Skinwalker. These officers, going out and then coming back, and then the hitchhiker effect, damaged some family members, the orbs. So it's pretty serious stuff, and I don't. I don't know what to do. I mean, this is really funny. I mean, my wife and I sleep with, on all our beds, right, there's rosaries and amulets, right? I don't know what else to do. I got a mezuzah on my front door. I'm not Jewish, but you know what I mean? It's like I got Buddhas in my backyard. I got, and I sleep with a locked door at night. I always have. I can't sleep in a dark room. Got to have a little bit of light. And I don't know. I mean, Stuart, would say, you have to. And I agree with Stuart. I mean, you can always ask it to leave you alone.
Sure.
But in the case stuff that you're talking about, and this is not the first time this has happened, where military aircraft, things along those, get too close, and and then you lose a life or two. But in the end, if you look at it over 80 years, we haven't lost that many people to this phenomenon, right? We've lost some, but losing one is bad enough, but we haven't lost like enough that make everybody jump up and down. So that was a good question, though.
That was a great
I wish I had more of an answer for you.
That was a great
that's something to
question.
be
Thank you.
understood. Thank you for
Sure.
Thank
chiming
you,
in on that.
Stefadelic. That was
Appreciate it.
awesome. And we'll give the last question to our friend, Mr. John Ramirez. He's going to unmute there. he
Okay,
is.
thank you. Jim, you just mentioned some of these anomalous health effects and what occurred at Skinwalker Ranch with some of the folks that were there. Is there any kind of correlation between that effect and what is popularly known as Havana syndrome?
Whoa. I just had a conversation with somebody about that not too long ago. I was a victim. They think I was a victim of Havana syndrome back in the 80s, believe it or not.
Wow.
This technology goes back probably to the mid 70s, and I really can't comment on too much, but the technology now is really available. I mean, anybody can do this. I mean, I shouldn't say anybody. I mean, you really need an engineer or somebody who's really good with electronics can actually do this and pose a problem. But yeah, there very well might be. I mean, Gary Nolan talked about this, so did Kit Green, about these commonalities between the two, and whether they're just happen to be, similar in some respects. I don't know, but the Havana syndrome, is something that's happening, to believe it or not, mostly agency people and NSA people and things along those lines, and some military people. It's usually intelligence people it's happening to. So that is definitely directed. Now, whether it's done by the Russians or it's done by what Pompeo once eerily commented on it. He said, "We think it might be a non-state hostile intelligence service." Think about that. The hell does that mean?
Yeah.
And he was very careful with his words. He's a very bright guy. So what leads me to believe it could be commercial, it could be industrial espionage, somebody trying to get information and then selling it, on a black market type of deal, and then in the meantime, now I do know that Mark Polymeropoulos, who is the head of CE, John, I think Mark.
Yeah.
When he went to Moscow and he got whacked, he and his deputy got whacked in Moscow. They told him not to go. He went, and they did it. I mean, they just, and you can't tell me that was, a coincidence. That was not a coincidence. They damaged that man, and they damaged him. He's a really good legendary officer in the agency, and they damaged him. So yeah, is there a link? There probably is. There certainly are a lot of similarities between the two. I can't for certain say they are. And if they were, though, John, I would ask you, what the hell does that mean?
Right. Yes.
You didn't have to answer that, but I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know what it would mean if there are similarities between the two. Does that mean that the phenomenon is now doing things like that? I don't know. But I do know it is a human technology that I do know, and that it is it's still being practiced, obviously, and it may be being practiced by independent players along with
state actors,
nation states. Yeah.
That's really scary. So even though it's sort of a dark topic to end on, I want to say that you and our honorary cabbie today, John Ramirez, have brought so much positivity into the space, which is why we do the show, is to kind of spread it, bring it, and just purvey that out into the UFO community. And And boy, did you really bring it. So this is a part where we each say goodbye, and we'll start with our UAP experience, or Steph.
I'm going to make it fast because I know we have to wrap up. It's been great sharing this space with you guys. Will continue to listen to you on your journey through exploring this wild thing that we're all, trying to figure out. So thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next show.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank
And
you.
Mr. Ramirez.
Well, Jim, it's an honor being with you. I think it's a first. I don't think any podcast has had two CIA officers at the same time. So it was a pleasure to be with you.
He's back. This is incredible. And let's see if we can hear him. And we'll see if Jim can hear us.
Does he think we closed out completely?
I don't think so. He may have just frozen if we lost him. That would be terrible. We were doing so good on our goodbyes. They were so beautiful. Okay. Oh, there he is. Yes, Jim, we see you on screen, but you're frozen.
Oh, darn it.
Okay. All right.
It was bad timing, but almost funny. Just as you were saying, the two of you were on the screen.
I'm going to.
Yeah, my intro was a little funky too.
Well,
while we're waiting, perhaps, John, since we've got you here, if we can get Jim back, we'd love to talk with you as well. Can you tell any of us what you've been working on, or what ideas are floating around your head right now?
Right. One of the projects is called Radio Contact. It's by Mark Sims and Jimmy Blanchette. I'm part of a private group based out of Sedona, Arizona. We do have a global presence, so with about 8 of us. We're using radios the way Jimmy Blanchette and Mark Sims use these radios to try to make contact. And so there's some exciting developments about that. And also, I will be appearing at the International UFO Congress in Mesa, Arizona in October. And I'll be presenting a talk on the legislation that is forthcoming fiscal year FY23, and comparing notes between what the NDA says, what the IA says, and how these various agencies might respond to the legislation, which opens up a lot of ability for people like me to come forward, for others to come forward with whistleblower protection and with somewhat forgiveness for coming forward with more truth that I think everyone would like to hear. And so I'll be doing that in October.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. DJ, did you get in touch with Jim? DJ. Several technical difficulties here at the end. So, well, that's really fantastic, John. And, have you seen, since you've kind of been more vocal about your experiences, and it sounds like you're getting a lot more involved, have you seen a positive response from your former colleagues or folks that are currently in the agency, in reaction to kind of what's happening generally in this area?
Well, I've reached back to some of my friends who I knew were experiencers from before. I try to urge them to come forward. And they're very reluctant to do so. So we might have to rely on this legislation to give them what we call top cover to come out with their story.
Right. Great. All right, DJ, one last time. You with us?
Hi, yes, sir. I'm back with you, and I want to relay from Jim on the phone. He wanted to thank John and you, Nathan, and Deb and Steph, and he really enjoyed it. He said it was a hoot. And I'm assuming that based on that, he'll probably come back with us. And I think we have enough questions on our spreadsheet now to do a whole other show.
We certainly do. Yeah. And on that note, as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to thank you, John, for joining us this evening. And thank you to everyone who's been listening to the show and dropping comments. We did see all the comments.
Yes.
Like DJ hinted, we have so many questions we couldn't get to. So hopefully we'll get a chance to do that again. And John, we'd love to have you back, of course, as well, to have an extended conversation, if that's okay with you. So if you haven't hit a like, we'd appreciate that very much. It does help the show. And if you haven't subscribed, that would help as well. And DJ, you want to take us out?
Yeah. Yes. Again, everything that Nathan said, he closed it up perfectly. So for Steph, for Debs, for John Ramirez, our guest or honorary cabbie, and for Money Nathan, my co-creating brother, this is DJ saying peace out, one love. We'll see you down the road, and we're always wondering what's up around the bend.